Hello, good day to one and all. This is Miss A. Krishna Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Mancheri. Today we are going to discuss the chapter titled as Amnesty, written by Nadine Gordimer. Since this is a long chapter which consists of 26-27 paragraphs, I have divided the video lecture into four different parts. So the first three parts would be discussing the chapter in detail, and the fourth part would be the question answer discussion. So here we start with the chapter, a brief biography regarding the author. Gordimer was born in Transvaal, a mining town in Johannesburg, in the year 1923. She started reading the great writers at the age of 9. She was a victim of racial segregation, and her first book, titled as Face to Face, was published in the year 1949. Many of her writings were banned at that time when white supremacy prevailed. She is also the founder member of the organization known as Congress of South African Writers. In the year 1991, she won the Nobel Prize for Literature, one of the most prestigious awards, and she passed away in the year 2014. The Nobel Committee described her as a writer who, through her magnificent epic, has been a very great benefit to humanity. Her works are mostly about the redemptive power of humanity. So, coming to the chapter, what is this about? What is this chapter about? Now, this is a short story which was published in the New Yorker in the year 1991. Now, 1991 is a very important year because this was the period when apartheid actually came to an end. It was legally pushed out of the society in the year 1991. So, this was published as a celebration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The narrator here in the chapter is a young South African woman. The story is about her fiancé, a black trade unionist who is imprisoned. The story discusses the racial discrimination that affected the people. It also depicts how the state crushes the spirit of the individuals. The chapter talks about the devastating effects of discrimination in the South African people. Moreover, it also gives a detailed analysis on the psychological and physical oppression that the black people suffered under white supremacy. Moreover, the relationship between the personal and the political, or in other words, between the individual and the society, is also discussed here. So, before stepping into the chapter, a brief note on racial discrimination. I'm sure you might have gone through these terms when you have studied history or social studies in your school days. So, racial discrimination means a person is discriminated on the basis of race or sometimes in the name of color. So, this term is known as apartheid, which was an institutionalized kind of racial segregation. It was a legalized social stratification. Only white supremacy was accepted. Asians and Africans were totally discarded. And this kind of a discrimination came in all walks of life. For example, in education, employment, use of public facilities, etc. Prohibition of mixed marriages remained, and women during this period were doubly oppressed. Now, some great names here would be Martin Luther King, again Nelson Mandela, etc. Martin Luther King was also an advocate of non-violent kind of resistance. King was a great admirer of Gandhiji. Maybe you might have studied about the greatness of Gandhi in the very first chapter written by Pearl S. Buck. So there is again the reference to African National Congress. Even mild protests were met with long years of imprisonment. The struggle lasted for more than 4 decades, and the dismantling of apartheid began in early 1990s. So this is a background of the story. So keep this information to understand the rest of the story. So, getting into the chapter, who is the narrator here? So, the narrator in this chapter is a young African woman. What is a mode of narration? It is a first person narration, which means the character herself is narrating the story, which means it is a young African woman who is telling us the story. Now, what is a method of narration? The method used here is stream of consciousness. So maybe this is a new term for you. Stream of consciousness means the character's thoughts and reactions are depicted in a continuous flow, which means this is something which might occur to every human beings. Which means when we sit alone, a lot of thoughts will cross our mind. Now, one after the other. Sometimes it might not be connected. Sometimes it would be a bunch of disconnected thoughts, but it moves from one thought to the other and it goes like a chain. Now, this is exactly what we mean by stream of consciousness, which means this disconnected thought. Sometimes it can be connected, sometimes it can be a disconnected thought, but this chain of thoughts of the character is described in detail. Now, what is the theme of the story? The main theme here is the difficulties of the African people, the kind of subjugation that they had gone through under white supremacy. Now, what is the structure of this short story? Now, what is a plot? The plot here, it is a story of a man being released from prison. So, an imprisoned man is coming home. So, it is a homecoming. That is the main theme or the main gist of the short story. Now, where is the setting? Now, the setting here is a farm. So, the location where the story happens, it's a village area and it is a farm. Now, who are the characters? Now, this young African woman is the main character. She is the narrator of the story. Now, then there is this man, the fiance of this lady. Now, his parents are there, her parents are there, some of their friends are also coming in between, and then there is a daughter, their daughter, this African woman's daughter is also there. Now, what is the point of view used? It is a first person narrative because the character herself is telling the story. Now, what is the meaning of the term amnesty? Now, amnesty means it is an official pardon granted by the government for those convicted. So sometimes if a person is convicted for 15 years or 20 years and is imprisoned, suddenly the government offers an official pardon so that this person would be released from the prison. So the main character's fiance is actually released from prison in such a way. So now, what is the crux of the story? So it's a repetitive point. So just to make you understand, it might look monotonous, but it will help you to understand things in a better way. So the woman's lover is getting released from the prison. So that is how the story is working here. And she brings in a lot of memories regarding their past life. Suddenly, she comes back to the present. The man reaches home, and now it is the story where the man becomes a changed man. So, if you look at the storyline, it's like what the relationship between the woman and her lover had been before imprisonment and what it is now after he comes back home being released from the prison. So it's a juxtaposition of past and present because the man is now coming home from jail. So, what was their relationship before? She's thinking, and this comes as a flashback or as a memory. And now the man arrives, he comes, and now she is thinking, what is a change? What are the changes that happen to him? What are the changes happening around them? So it is actually placing past and present side by side. Now, there is also another conflict which is very important here, that is about the man. Is he a family man or is he a political man? Which means, is he having more affection towards the personal side, the family side, or the political or the social side? So it is something like individual versus society or personal versus political. The struggles undergone by this black woman is highlighted here. So this is a main crux or the nucleus of the story. So before we begin, I want you to keep the copy of the essay with you and to number each paragraph. So please pause the video and please start numbering and tell me how many paragraphs are there in total. Now we are dividing it into paragraphs so that it makes much more easier to connect with the paragraphs and lines, specifically when it is a video online kind of lecture. So if you have completed the task, there will be 27 paragraphs. Now I would ask you to avoid the single line in page number 76 and the very last two lines in page number 79. Just ignore these three lines, and then if you mark, you will be getting 27 paragraphs. So let's begin. So once again, before we start with the paragraphs, what is the summary of this chapter? A young African woman narrates the story of her fiancé returning home from an imprisonment. As a flashback story, she tells how he got imprisoned as he stood for the rights of the black people. He went to town and joined as a construction worker, and he joined trade unions. He was accused for the protests they conducted for the rights of the black people. During the trial, a daughter was born to them, Ingulo Leku. This is the name of the daughter, and the meaning here is freedom. When this daughter is 6 years, he returns home. Now that they are united and the woman carries her second child, he goes for his work again and the woman waits for him again as the story ends. So, this is the entire plot that you can see in this short story. So, now we are moving on to the paragraphs. We'll discuss each of the paragraphs present here. So moving on to para number 1. So this is how the short story begins. I have marked it in italics because I have taken exactly the same lines from the text. So this is how the story commences. When we heard he was released, I ran all over the farm and through the fence to our people on the next farm to tell everybody. I only saw afterwards I had torn my dress on a barbed wire and there was a scratch with blood on my shoulder. So, this is the very first paragraph, and you will get the ambience or the entire setting which describes the upcoming events. When we heard he was released, so look at the terms that she is using. She is not saying I, she is using the term we. And look at the second line again, you can see to our people, not to my people. So these two words can really stand for the unity of this farm people or this village people. So there is some kind of a solidarity that you can see in this people. So she got the news that he is going to be released. So, in order to pass the information to all the people around, she was running. I only saw afterwards I had torn my dress on the barbed wire. Now you can see the picture. This is barbed wire. Now this is a local method of building a compound wall. So this is a very cheap kind of method where only some kind of barbed wire is required. So naturally, when you cross these kind of fences, definitely there is a chance that you get scratched. So the very same thing happened here. So she tore her dress on the barbed wire and there was a scratch with blood on my shoulder. So this is how the story begins. Now, the very first paragraph itself shows the emotional torture the African women go through. So, look at the lady's condition. She is a young girl, and it is after 6 years that her fiance is coming back home. And within the 6 years, the relationship they maintained happened only through letters. This also shows the excitement of the lady who's actually the speaker here, the main character or the narrator of the story here. So the first paragraph will tell us the emotional torture, at the same time the excitement of this lady when she realizes that her fiance is coming home, released from the jail. Moving to para 2, the story moves into flashback now. And the woman narrates how her fiance went to the town and joined a construction company. So now it is just like a retrospect story. It goes with her memories. So this is the past time. Initially, he came once in a week and 2 weeks for Christmas. She narrates that it was a time he asked her father for her. So, this was a time when he proposed her. So, he got a job at the construction company, and then he comes and he asks her father for her. He joined the trade union and started participating in strikes. He was also good in English and was slowly becoming a leader who protested against white supremacy and stood for the rights of the blacks. So you can actually see past events are narrated here. And this paragraph will also tell you how this man became a part of the strikes and protest. So, this is actually showing the transformation of this man. He was an ordinary man who went to the town to work in a construction company, but slowly he was getting into politics and he was becoming a mouthpiece to advocate for the rights of the blacks. So, past and present, this also talks about the relationship of the couple in the past and after when he comes back home. Moving to para 3, the narrator now tells how there were problems in his hostel. So maybe this is something which is happening at the construction company and how riots began. During the third year, it was heard he was in prison. So he worked there for the first 2 years, and during the third year, they got the information that he was in prison. The narrator, the lady, had just completed Standard 8 and was working in a farm school then. So we have to understand that she is a very young girl. Their life as farmers was also filled with poverty. So, this was another issue because when this man was imprisoned, it was this young girl who took care of both the families, her families and the man's family. Both the families did not have enough money, and the promised marriage between them also never happened. So they were actually destined to get married, but somehow they couldn't get married because he was in the town, he got imprisoned. So we can see how this man was getting transformed as a political leader and how they got separated. This is also narrated here. But at the same time, we have to understand the strength of their relationship because even when he was imprisoned, without having a committed married relationship, she was still taking care of his family. But she realizes the fact that the man still loves her, and it is because of certain circumstantial conditions that they could not get married. So, moving on to para 4, the lady now remembers how she went to see him in court during his trial. So, once she goes to the court to see him, He was well dressed because the judge should not feel that these were ignorant farm people, but people who were aware of their rights. So he was well dressed, and this was really shocking for this young girl because she had always seen him as a man from the village. But when she went to the court, he was totally in a different way. He was well dressed, and he had a very good reason for that because if they were not well dressed, the judges would feel that they are ignorant people. So, in a way, he's actually talking about a reality which is around us because sometimes people assess you or assess your qualities on the basis of which or by which you carry yourself. So that is something which is very important. So he actually gives us some kind of good techniques, or sometimes, as you can see, some kind of tips which are really essential when you become a leader advocating the rights. So he says he was well dressed because he wanted to prove to the judge that he is not an ordinary ignorant man. So sometimes people take you even through, people understand you even through your dress, not always through your words and actions. So everything matters. This is what he is trying to say. Their little daughter was born during this period. She once brought the baby girl to the court to show him. All his comrades came up and gave her some money as a gift for the baby. He chose the name for her Inkulo Leku, which means freedom. So again, you can see the strong bond between the man and the woman. Despite a legal bond of marriage, they still hold a very strong relationship. And moreover, the strong unity among the comrades, that is another important element here. So, moving on to para 5, the trial was over and he got an imprisonment of 6 years. He was sent to the island. This was the most popular prison in South Africa and it was situated in Cape Town. Now, this prison, which is situated in an island, is known as Robben Island Prison. Now, you can see the picture here. This is a very famous prison because many of the great leaders, the freedom fighters, the black leaders, were actually imprisoned here, and Nelson Mandela is one among them. So, moving on to para 6. He used to write a letter every month. So, see, all these are past events. Okay, she is just memorizing these events when she is getting ready for welcoming him. He used to write a letter every month. She passes the message in the letter to both families. Once his father told, God will make everything all right for him. So she actually stands as a messenger, taking the letter, reading it out to his parents, and his parents would write a reply and she would convey this to him. So she was acting like a messenger or a mediator. So once his father said, God will make everything all right for him. And when this was communicated, he wrote back. So I'm quoting it from the textbook, so that is why it is written in italics. He says, that is the trouble. Our people on the farms, they are told God will decide what is good for them so that they won't find the force to do anything to change their lives. So, a very strong message is conveyed in this short story through the man's character. The message that we should act rather than waiting for God to act for us. Now, sometimes when terrible things happen in life, human beings have a tendency to thrust the responsibility of those things on fate or sometimes on God. But here the man says that there are so many things where you can act, you can perform. You needn't wait for the God to give an answer for that. So we have to act. Now, he's specifically talking about the oppression suffered by the black people under white supremacy. So, he argues that we have to fight for our rights, we have to fight for the cause. Only then we will be granted the freedom. And that is why he names his daughter Inkululeko as freedom. So, this is a very good message that comes through the short story. So, with this, we come to the end of part 1 of Amnesty. So please check the next video for part 2. So thank you very much for your patient listening. If you have any queries or if you need more assistance, please do not hesitate to connect with me in my email ID. So thank you very much. Thank you.